we have rather reversed now, and we are right at the beginning because 1990s struggle, which has ignited the voice for democracy, had continued until 2004 when Bhutan government abruptly announced the declaration of draft constitution, which they said was the beginning of the democratization in Bhutan. And we waited for some time to look into the result of the government's announcement, which after we got the draft constitution on our review of it, we found that it was not in keeping with the demand and aspirations of the people. So we had prepared a kind of people's suggestions for incorporation in the next finalization of the draft. But even after 1 year, we find that the government's exercise towards finalization of the constitution had not given any attention to our suggestions. And ultimately, we found that the process of democratization was nothing but strengthening of the legalization of the monarchy only. And that is why we feel that we have to start right from the beginning.
But will you have considered the constitution as the real constitution, provided that your suggested constitution was accepted by the king or other regime?
Yes, if our suggestions would have been incorporated or considered by the Bhutan's regime, then naturally, since we had incorporated all our aspirations in our suggestions, naturally it would have been that the democracy, that the process of democracy would have been the kind of one that we had been aspiring for. But since it has not come out in that perspective, we find that we have to start right from the beginning.
So how do you evaluate? Many say that the problem is an ethnic cleansing. What do you say? How do you remark?
I totally disagree with it. Because if it had been ethnic cleansing, then I would not have been here. Because I don't belong to a Nepali speaking community. I belong to the indigenous community of Bhutan, whose history goes back to as old as the soil of that country. And like me, there are also hundreds and thousands of different communities other than Champas, spread all over northeast Bhutan, northeast India, and Nepal also, who are either registered or not registered in the refugee camps. So we have quite a quite a good population of indigenous people who also are the victims of the regime's atrocities and who are also people who had aspired for democratic change of their choice.
Well, in Bhutan, you were very close to the royal families, and you even worked in high portfolios in government officials and in private sectors. So, what were the reasons that you need to come out of the country?
Well, I think about 28 years of my service in different organizations holding different responsibilities was an experiment of life in my country, because during the course of over 2 decades of my service, I only learned the kind of administration, kind of political status, and the political kind of political what you call existence of Bhutan, because we were more or less not more than speaker. We were only, we were performing ourselves on the basis of his master's voice. So we had no such exposures as we gained, as I gained after I left Bhutan in 1997. We had no such thing as politics during those times. We had no such exposures where we could get political education. And even the word kind of democracy was not in our subject during those days. What we were taught was we were taught to obey, we were taught to carry out the instructions, and beyond that, we had no right to our expressions and speech. Even when we used to attend regional or international seminars or conferences on the representing the country, we were totally briefed, and we were asked to carry out do's and don'ts. And after coming back, we were asked to report. We were made to give the entire report on what we had gone through in different seminars and conferences. And if government ever found that we had gone against the government's policies or government's instructions, then actions were due. Such actions would range from termination of service, from stopping of annual increments, to even imprisonments. Fortunately, I think I had very sincerely carried out government's instructions, and I did not become a victim of that kind of actions. So during those days, I was really not quite aware about what was going on in the country, but we had been like, since I entire life I was in the capital only. It was like sitting under the lamppost, because actions, whatever the actions, political actions, whatever the political activities that were happening in the capital and in the policy making chambers, they were spread only outside Thimphu. And in Thimphu, people never used to know about what was happening. So it was like the light that gives way to the street, but the post was always dark. Then, if I may go back to the Tibetan Bhutanese conflict in 1974, only after the people were arrested, only after the case was closed, rather, people came to know that such political situations had come up in Bhutan. And at that time, I was in the Quinsel department. I was a translator and editor in Tsongkha. So finally, when the case was about to be closed, we got the government order to make it public through the Quinsel. So similarly, even in the 1990s, aggressive government's repression, and when people were evicted from southern Bhutan particularly, not much was known to us. We only thought that the government's version would have been right, and that what government was doing could have been probably right. But later on, when we found out that there were also similar discriminations prevailing in the eastern Bhutan, which affected not only our families but also our other relatives and other communities, we tried to review the case, and we found that besides other discriminatory policies, government had also intervened in the religious issues.
That means you did not take part in the massive demonstration during early 1990s?
No, we didn't. We only observed it. But when we realized that government had also intervened in the religious activities, because the eastern Bhutan, particularly where I belong, we follow Nyingmapa religion, Nyingmapa faith, and most of the people in the western side, they follow the Kagyupa. And of course, Bhutan has since time immemorial being following the dual system of Kajupa and Ningmapa, and we call it Kaning Zungdel, and the chief being the Jekembo, above whom until 1907 was Shabdung also. But then after the government's intervention, what we found was that government had firstly identified, I mean the king himself had firstly appointed one highest Nyingmapa Lama as the head of the Nyingmapa to look after the establishment in eastern Bhutan with his headquarters in Yongla Gomba. But after some time, when his establishment prospered, when the monks, when the population of monks increased, when he also expanded his establishments, somewhere there was political fear, I believe, in the government, and on the report from government's inside people, he was banned from entering into Bhutan, and he was rather dismissed from Bhutan, and his establishments were closed, and ultimately the shachops who were attending those institutions and shedas, they were victimized. The shedas, about 16 shedas were closed, and the boys who were studying in those institutions were sent back to their hometowns. And since they were almost grown up, they could neither join schools nor they could think about any other institutions. So that way, their life was, I mean, were completely spoilt. And not only that, when we looked into other areas, like in the imposition of labor, we found that shachops and lhatsampas were those people who were given maximum. They were employed maximum in the labor.
Can you just differentiate between Sarsap and Losampas?
Well, I would say that Lhosampas were more exposed to the political education because of easy cross-border access, and Shachops were totally in contradiction to it. They were not aware of it. But then the kind of political atrocities, the kind of discriminations, I believe, was there in eastern Bhutan rather than in the Lhosampa area. Because Lhosampa area, because of being in the south, being at the India border, Bhutan government had, I mean, they were lucky enough to have the better facilities than Shachops. So when we looked at it, we found that Shachops were deprived of right to health, right to education, and right to other social benefits in all aspects.
And since from the time you fled the country, you have been advocating the Bhutanese refugee issue. What's your say on how this issue will be resolved?
Well, from my perceptions, I have always referred to the government's own version of writing the history. In one of the chapters of the Bhutanese history, government's version, what it says is that southern Bhutan was once upon a time a marshy land occupied by venomous reptiles and ferocious animals, and no northern people or no one could ever go there to occupy the land. So ultimately, when the land was when the government felt the threat of land going into the hand of the neighbors, then government had deployed Nepali-speaking people from neighboring states as well as from Nepal, I believe. If we refer back to Shabdung history also, we can find that some houses, some families had been imported from Nepal and made them occupy those areas. And that is why they were known as Gorkhas at that time. And only it was 1958 when the Third National Assembly in Paro had decided that the Gorkhas be renamed as Lhosampas, and the people of the south, uh, whom the government wanted it to be referred as Lhosampas, be considered equal to citizens of Bhutan. And from that day onwards, they were made to even the Lhosambas were even made to pay taxes directly to Thimphu government, because prior to that they were under the supervision of the Zimpen, uh, who had his office in Kalimpong, and that refers back to again somewhere uh, at the beginning of the monarchy in the uh, early 20th century, when Kazi Ugen was appointed as the first Zimpen to the king, who was stationed in Kalimpong again, and he was assigned to look after the resettlement and rehabilitation, not rather rehabilitation, rather settlement of people in the south, to safeguard the land as well as to see that proper settlement is done in the south. That is how the southern population spread from Sipsu to Daifang.
Yeah, that one we understand very clearly. You have been advocating on favor of refugees for the last one decade, more than one decade. So, what's your actual say on how this issue would be solved?
So what I am saying is the government, whatever may be the case, government must accept repatriation of all the genuine Bhutanese refugees uh, in order to resolve the entire process. Because the southern Bhutan, uh, I won't say southern Bhutan belongs to only the Nepali speaking people, but I would say that all Lhosapas belong to Bhutan. So they have to be taken back. And if there is shortage of land, it will be the government's responsibility to provide lands. And it must be resolved amicably, and it must be resolved once for all.
But citing the unfeasibility of immediate return home process, uh, the resettlement has already begun, and it's been learned that more than 50,000 have already declared their interest towards resettlement. How do you evaluate?
I think if at all the repatriation begins, the resettlement will can be nullified, and people who are resettled down there, if they are resettled in the landed areas where the earlier where the refugees used to stay, then I think they will have to vacate. And if they are resettled in government plot, as a Bhutanese, they also have this equal rights. So that is why I think repatriation has to be there in one hand, and on the other hand, rehabilitation has also to be there for those people who are resettled in the southern Bhutan.
But I mean, if repatriation do not take place, what do you
Well-
think? How do you think the future of people, those wishing to get repatriated, would be?
Well, in order to maintain peace and harmony, in order to ensure peace in the region, I think repatriation has to be accepted, and it must begin some day or other, and it has to be resolved only through repatriation. And because even the establishment of democracy, so-called democracy in Bhutan, is also totally incomplete without repatriation. Only through repatriation, democracy can also be completed.
So what do you think is the main reason behind not getting this repatriation process very practical?
Well, the education, the educated, the literacy rate in Bhutan, as of now, is hardly about 58%. Hardly about 58%. And of that, only about some 10% are in the higher level of the bureaucracy, who have little access to policy making. And those people, they are also from behind, they are supported by their own family members who are in the rural areas, and who are educated as well as not educated, literate as well as not literate, and so they depend on each other. So unless political awareness is uh, created among the family members in all the regions of the country, I think it will be very difficult. So I think it will take time, because when the time for when the momentum had gained once in 1998, uh, it was unfortunate uh, of the force here that we could not give continuation for obvious reasons, and we anticipated India to intervene on this, but it was our unfortunate. It was fortunate of us that India also didn't come forward.
By the way, many say that until India so its sincere hands or put its sincere hands on the problem, the issue will not be resolved. What do you think?
I think even for India to intervene in this, I think it will be the main body will be ourselves. We should move. Unless we move, India cannot also just come and intervene just like that.
And then how can you move? You were
Like,
blocked at the Methi Bridge.
No, that's what I am trying to say. See, as we say, there is a very popular phrase in the Bhutanese language. What we say is that when we do the jagri, we no, we have to move first. Only then the spirit comes. So to move ahead, I think this Mechi Bridge is not the only excuse that we have to look into it. We have to now develop linkages with our own people inside the country. We have to educate them. We have to build up the network, and we have to gain their support and confidence. And it is not the Mechi Bridge only, because Mechi Bridge can be crossed only officially. But voice can be raised inside the country once we develop our network. So that work has to be carried out, and I think that will be. For that reason, I am saying that it will take time, because we have to cross the third country from here when we go and do any kind of work inside the country.
You have been holding the top position in your party, Group National Congress, but we did not hear anything. We did not read any news regarding the party registration inside Bhutan during the recently concluded election. What was the reason behind it?
Well, it is very clear, because we have not accepted the constitution. So when we have not accepted the constitution of the government, of the regime, question of accepting the political change in Bhutan does not arise. So when we have not accepted the democratization, registration does not arise. So registration will be there only when the democratization process goes according to our aspirations. That is the reason why we have not made any attempt for registration. And because government had set up certain criteria, like qualification limitations, like other criteria to qualify certain members in a political party. Even a political party formed inside the country was rejected for those reasons. So from that point of view, you can see that we cannot fit into the present scenario, which is not acceptable to us.
Do you like to say anything particularly to the world communities or to those who will be viewing this?
Well, particularly, I want to see that. I want to approach to the democracy-loving people around the world that if Bhutan government's democratization has got any sincerity, if they think that there is any sincerity, they should have first accepted the existence of the political organizations in exile. They should have accepted the aspirations of the people for repatriation. They should have accepted the people's aspirations for harmonization of peace inside the country. So without doing all these things, Bhutan abruptly declared democracy in Bhutan, and which we see that there is no sincerity in it, and to the world community, I would like to personally approach, you see that in order to keep up with the sanctity of the democracy, the world community must also help us advocate or help us support in our advocacy to tell the Bhutan government to bring in sincere democracy, the true democracy, the inclusive democracy, and not to applaud the kind of democracy which is just going to strengthen and legalize the monarchy only, which is totally obsolete.
So thank you very much for your time.
Can I interrupt here? You may also ask about the coronation going to take place about fifth king. What are the differences you see about the reign of the fourth Duke Galpo and now? Is it really constitutional? And why are you not? Why you are averse to royal family, that you can't support royal family anymore and you stand as opposition leader?
Well, the fifth king's coronation, first of all, we have not accepted him as the king. So question of accepting or non-accepting does not arise about the coronation, because a country cannot have two kings. Fourth king is already very active. He is neither amputed nor he is paralyzed. He is very active, healthily, and he has been praised by the people inside the country. And we also wanted that he, as the troublemaker, should have resolved the problem by himself. But since he could not, since he failed in his task, only to showcase to the international community, he abdicated, and he showed the legacy being transferred to his son, and that too, the son who was born before the coronation of his wives.
Okay. How do you see Bhutan in next 10 years or next 12 years or 15 years back? No, in future. How do you see Bhutan?
Future.
Yeah.
It all depends, because we have 10 children, 5 princes and 5 princes. So I don't know to what extent the fourth king would be able to fulfill the desire of these children, because we have 20 districts, and 20 districts are administered by 20 zongdas, and since we have 10 prince and princess, it is like going to be king's representative in 10 ministries. So that could also happen, because already the king had appointed some of his daughters, to look after the Monga region, some district regions like that. So from that point of view, it all depends on the people now, because people should be able to understand the changes being brought about by the fourth king and the continuation being given by the so-called fifth king. So from the prophecy, since we believe in the prophecies also, from the prophecy, what we have learned was that the fifth king does not exist actually. It says only up to the fourth king, and the fifth king's case is not there. But we still don't know, because prophecy is something that the royal families might have hidden the certain part of the prophecies in order to safeguard their own existence. So now fifth king has, according to them, the fifth king has come, and has been functioning since the last about 9 months now, and he's likely to have his coronation in this coming month, and even the coronation, we don't know how much people would appreciate, because since we are now in Nepal and since we don't have physical presence inside the country, we have actually not seen with our own eyes. But what we have learned is that even during the finalization of the constitution, when people were asked to, when the ministers and when those people were asked to sign the final decision of the government, there were some kind of thoughts being shared among themselves. But I don't know clearly what were those things. So, if proper political education is given, uh, in view of the lot of discriminations still continuing inside the country, and in view of the family members being left outside the country who are not allowed to come back, I think people should be able to develop their understandings, and then some kind of political strength if they could develop, some kind of changes if they could bring within themselves. I think political changes according to our aspirations could also be possible. Uh, and you know, the political changes comes abruptly also. We will never know. It can come within 5 years also. It can come within 6 months also. It can go for another 10 years also. We don't know.
The political party got only 3 seats probably in the parliament, although the political party, the opposition party, was led by King's cousin brother. Does this indicate that the royal families are not more popular, not more popular? Although,
Not three, two oppositions.
yeah, two oppositions.
Yeah, oppositions are only two.
There are only two oppositions, and one got only 3 seats, which was led by King's cousin brother. What does that indicate?
I
Does it
think-
indicate that the royal families are not going to be popular anymore?
I think that was a total proof and evidence of people's dislike of the royal families, and this was, I think, discussed even in their families. Immediately after the result was announced, they had discussed in the family.
But popularly known is that kings are regarded as the precious jewel of Bhutanese society, Milurimos and something like this. Publicly, they say he is the precious jewel, and at the same time, practically, they are not recognized anymore as.
See, if you are facing a tiger, in front of the tiger, you will always bow in front of the tiger. But at the back of the tiger, people will always talk about the tiger again, negatively that too. So about Bhutan's king also, I would say that yes, Jigme Singye Wangchuk as a king, people loved him. People considered him as a jewel, as a gem. But it is all because of his, on the other side, is all because of his weakness, that he had not been able to keep his family members of the queens under control, and they had expanded their wings of greediness in all sectors of public property, and that is how I think it backfired. And because until the last moment of the voting, they were confident of winning the seats. But at the last moment, when the voting was counted, when they found that they were being derailed, I think it was really a shock for them.
So, will Bhutan remain as last Shangri-La under its constitutional monarchy?
I think Bhutan was never a Shangri-La. It was a broken Shangri-La rather, because we had experienced several atrocities right from 17th century. The killing of Shabdungs, series of Shabdungs, whether they were butchered or whether they were poisoned, whatever it is, killings were there. And that too, the person of the highest esteem. Then we remember the incidents of Prime Minister's assassination, and the killing of the culprits, shooting of the culprits. Then after that, again the political atrocities on the king's consort and victimization of innocent people later on in 1973 and 74. And then the major part of the incidents in 1989 onwards, which has left over 100,000 people totally victimized, stateless. So from this point of view, I would say that if ever Bhutan was a Shangri-La, maybe from the natural environment point of view, Bhutan was a Shangri-La and will remain a Shangri-La. But from the political point of view, I think Bhutan has been a broken Shangri-La ever since then.
Thank you very much.